tell us any more about this ongoing, what in my view is ongoing genocide in Iraq?
There have been some recent reports coming out of there, which we intend to be publishing by one in particular, a fellow who's on tour named, I think, Dennis Halliday, was a UN relief official who got absolutely disgusted about last August and said, you know, I can't be part of this. They say they're helping people, but in effect, we have allowed this regime to continue without any way out. And that's what the Iraqis say, and it's absolutely the case. If you go back to when the embargo was first implemented in 1990, the goalpost for what it would take to be able to get rid of the embargo has constantly changed.
Right.
And there's no way that the people who have this in effect conceive that the Iraqis could actually comply. Saddam Hussein or no Saddam Hussein. There's a very chilling interview that was given by Leon Firth, Al Gore's national security advisor, who recently had a heart attack, but I understand he's still intimately involved in discussions of strategy through secured phone lines and other things like that. Firth has been Gore's advisor on national security for, I believe, almost 20 years, and he was involved in advising Gore during the Gulf War and advising him to support it, and the follow-up policy of technological apartheid against Iraq. And what I think this was Firth, it could have been Gore, one of the interviews that was done at the time. Firth just was asked by somebody who was naive and honest, well, look, I mean, don't you need high technology if you're going to have a modern society to provide medicine and education for your people? And he said, the world doesn't need Iraqi scientists.
My God.
So, in other words, there are going to be those who are going to get technology and have a decent living standard, and there are those who will be on the dole if we decide that they're going to get any of this at all. So this is really what's happening now. The United Nations, this has not been just the British-American Commonwealth operation. The United Nations has all been complicit in this operation with this Wellesian idea. And it's been extremely unfortunate. I think the sharpest thing that was ever said about it, the regime of sanctions, came from Mahathir Mohamad, actually, in 1990, the fall of 1990. He said, I thought we gave up siege warfare.
This is the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Yeah, Prime Minister of Malaysia, when we left the Middle Ages. But that's what this is. This is siege warfare until...
Starve them out, in other words.
And starve them out, cut off their water supply, cut off their food supply. But unlike the Middle Ages, it's until what, right?
Right.
They already signed surrender, and yet there is no relief actually in sight. So this is paradigmatic of what we can see in the entire world. And when places, therefore, like Russia and China look at the United States throwing itself whole hog under the influence of Gore and Brzezinski, and strongly under the influence of Blair, behind this policy, they are incredibly alarmed. I mean, there's been great alarm, as we've been told, in the Vatican and in the Kremlin, where you had people who thought they had a decent relationship with President Clinton, that they had an understanding of the common aspirations of their people, which they did.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it's as if there's been a body snatching of President Clinton.
Yes,
and he's operating instead on this technological apartheid idea. So Iraq is a symbol in many respects, and that's what they see happening to them. If it could happen, if it can continue without end and without any idea of a just peace to Iraq, then it could happen to any country in the world if this regime is allowed to proceed.
That's what I neglected to say at the beginning. I should have said is that a just war is fought in behalf of the peace to follow the war. But the people who are launching these wars have no notion of any sort of peace to follow the war. They only know how to unleash war. And they have duped our president And so that it seems to me, in a way, the more he violates his own inner convictions in behalf of this duping, the more violent and crazy he seems. For instance, the Pope proposed an Easter ceasefire. Clinton didn't only reject the ceasefire, but he rejected it by debating theology with the Pope, saying the proper way to celebrate the Prince of Peace is not by permitting ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. So our president has been brainwashed and will suffer a tragic fate if this is not reversed quickly. Now, Zhu Rongji, the Prime Minister of China, is in the United States for his summit meetings with President Clinton. This potentially offers a way out, as you've been discussing, along the lines of the new Bretton Woods proposal of Lyndon LaRouche.
According to all reports that we have, Zhu Rongji is the best guy to be here. If anyone can do it, he might be able to do it. People should be aware that, as President Clinton actually said before this bombing campaign started, Zhu came here against tremendous opposition in his own country, that the campaign of effectively calling the Chinese the yellow peril, which has been picked up in this country to fever pitch over the past couple months, particularly by a whole number of these lunatic geopoliticians, Republicans in Congress, but also by a whole section of the intelligence establishment as well, has actually created a storm in China of opposition to the possibility of collaboration and strategic partnership with the United States. And there was serious discussion with Zhu as to whether he should maintain this trip, which was established, whose schedule was established months ago, and which President Clinton just over the past month, 6 weeks, had upgraded to a state visit in hopes of getting an advance in the strategic partnership and putting a lot of importance on it. Now, so Zhu has arrived, did arrive starting in, he'll be spending a lot of time outside Washington, actually, with business people and so policy layers, as well as inside Washington. He says he's here to answer questions and to forcefully put forward China's view on questions from human rights to trade and so forth. I think the first thing he did was make some trade concessions, and there's obviously a heavy effort on his part to educate people on the actual intentions of China and to break through what otherwise is, I mean, talk about brainwashing, a perception which is being created in the U.S. media that the Chinese are, number one, wanting to, and number two, capable of launching some military takeover campaign against the United States. This is one of the most lunatic ideas that anyone could conceivably have. But that is precisely what is being done. Now, Zhu will get a number of different responses here. People should realize, for example, that the essence of geopolitical thinking is to play one partner against the other. So that, therefore, when Britain, for example, lures the United States into a war, it may very well turn around 2 weeks from then and attack the United States for being ogres. Same is the case with this China-Russia situation. Brzezinski, whom we were discussing before, is all very friendly with China. He thinks that the United States should, as Kissinger has also said, and Lyndon LaRouche calls them Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, because they tend to have slightly different takes on the same geopolitical outlook for the British, that we should be friendly and involve China and bring them into the World Trade Organization, something which a lot of rational people in China don't think should be done because it will help destroy their economy. They look around at South Asia and they say, this was no big help to have your economy open in this way. But on the other side, as long as that friendship is arranged in such a way as to be a conflict with Russia, this is perfectly fine. So he'll run into a whole variety of ways of trying to either contain as well as confront China.
Right.
But we understand him to be extremely humorous and capable and knowledgeable of American history, as you find many of these current crop of Chinese post-Mao leaders are, who are looking at trying to develop their country finally. They've studied Franklin Delano Roosevelt and what he's done. They have looked at the peaceful technologies, and they're trying to get the best out of the West. After all, Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the Republic of China, was a total devotee of Abraham Lincoln and was created as a Republican, Christian Republican in fact, by the networks which Lincoln had sent around the globe to promote railroads and joint economic development, very similar to that of the Eurasian land bridge, which Mr. LaRouche is promoting today.
So can you say more about LaRouche's New Bretton Woods proposal? I know we've featured it on shows all the time. But.
Right. Well, LaRouche's proposal has called for a conference between sovereign nations that would effectively reorganize the monetary system, eliminate free trade in currencies, and establish a basis for long-term credit issuance between nations based on a development perspective. It doesn't work without, it doesn't work simply as currency controls, which we should go back to, like the old Bretton Woods, and everyone should agree on that perspective. It doesn't work just on debt reorganization, although in this conference a lot of debt is going to have to be shelved, particularly speculative debt, but also sovereign debt, as in the case of Russia, where there's unpayable and unconscionable debts. But then a development perspective, particularly around developing the heartland of the planet, Eurasian land bridge, totally in the interests of the United States, as well as every other major nation and minor nation of the world.
So it combines what worked in the old Bretton Woods Agreement with what's been otherwise called as a just New World Economic Order, which features development of developing countries, or combined development of developing and developed countries.
Right. The problem that has tended to happen in recent years is people say you have to take down one section of the world economy to build up another. Not so. The entire capability of the advanced sector has to go together with nations like China and Russia to build up this center. And that's the hope, that President Clinton will reestablish the basis for this strategic partnership and see that as the alternative to war, a way to peace.
You've been listening to EIR Talks.
Hussein. There's a very chilling interview that was given by Leon Firth, Al Gore's national security advisor, who recently had a heart attack, but I understand he's still intimately involved in discussions of strategy through secured phone lines and other things like that. We have allowed this regime to continue without any way out, and that's what the Iraqis say, and it's absolutely the case. If you go back to when the embargo was first implemented in 1990, the goalpost for what it was, I think Dennis Halliday was a UN relief official who got absolutely disgusted about last August and said, you know, I can't be part of this. They say they're helping people, but in effect...
Tell us any more about this ongoing, what in my view is ongoing genocide in Iraq?
There have been some recent reports coming out of there, which we intend to be publishing by one in particular, a fellow who's on tour named Take, to be able to get rid of the embargo has constantly changed. And there's no way that the people who have this in effect conceive that the Iraqis could actually comply. Saddam Hussein or no Saddam